Angel-Geschichte's Facebook page and also broadcasting on the Dimensions of Disclosure Collaborative Facebook site as well. So this morning, this broadcast came out of a conversation I was having on another forum, and it was about what do you do, hello Michelle, what do you do whenever you are trying to go deeper in your spirituality? How do you do that? And I said, and they were like, oh, you go to your third eye, you spend more time on your third eye, there's other reasons given. And I didn't see anything on there about going into the heart. And so, we know that this, at least we know that this is an ancient practice of combining the mind with the heart. And if you put your attention on anything, your energy concentrates there. The yi, the mind, so yi is the word yi in Chinese. And that is it doesn't mean just your intellect, it is more than that, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll just say it's your intention, your focus of intention. You put that anywhere, and you end up having energy cultivate there. It congregates, it accumulates in that space. So when I realized that people don't understand that at large in the spiritual community, like I'm a spiritual person, but you don't understand that where you put your intention, chi, life force, it congregates there. So if you're putting it in the chest, right, if you're dropping that awareness down into the chest, you end up having what? A focus of that energy into the chest, all right? So I wanted to have a live class about that. I wanted to have it also on that forum I was talking about, but the administrators didn't want us to do that. So I said, well, we'll move it to ours, and we'll also move it to the Dimensions of Disclosure Collaborative site as well. So Angel-Geschichte, hello, our site. And then you have, of course, Dimensions of Disclosure Collaborative right here. And so this is Angel, who also then channels Geschichte. So you have Angel-Geschichte. And I thought, man, we should have them on, her on, so we can have a well-rounded discussion about this topic. Not just this topic of focusing the mind here, but what does that mean in the whole scheme of things when it comes to spirituality and when it comes to the Ascension process, and really maybe a brief overview from Angel-Geschichte on what the Ascension process is according to them. So that's the launch pad, that's the jumping off point of this particular class, okay? We're going to try to keep it about an hour, so if you can hang with us until the top of the next hour, we'd appreciate it. So I'll hand it over to you for the moment.
All right. Hello, everyone. So for those that are watching on our channel, you know me. For those that are on the Dimensions of Disclosure, when I was 19 years old, I had a near-death experience, and I met the angelic realm, which showed itself as this huge tsunami of energy. And I called that energy God, and it communicated back to me through telepathy that its name was Geschichte. I learned many years later from my father, who is a theologian, that word Geschichte is used in studies, in theological studies, to describe the holy history. So it's described as Heilsgeschichte, I believe is the terminology that's used. And it means history, story, saga, narrative, which was pretty interesting. So over the course of the next couple decades, I'm 41 now, I went through pretty intense spiritual training on many different levels. It was not super clean, it was pretty sloppy, and I experienced all kinds of trauma alongside mystical experiences, blah, blah, blah. That has all tempered me into a better person. When I was 34 in 2012, Geschichte moved into my body for the first time to speak through me. And ever since then, Geschichte has been teaching classes, holding private sessions, and helping people to spiritually evolve. So what I'm going to do is sing a song that Geschichte taught me when I was in my 20s. It's their song, and after I've sung this song, then Geschichte will be talking to you guys. So if you all can just relax and enjoy the song.
I like to recommend that people put their hands, palms up in your lap, so that you can feel what you may feel during the song and after that as well, if you wish. Meaning energy and movement in the body. All right?
Okay.
We haven't warmed up this morning, so just bear with us.
And I'm going to start recording.
And we have our folks here, Angel-Geschichte Facebook, and our DOD folks. Alrighty, here we go.
Om
Sei Safanata Om Sei Safanata Hey Safe Nenkam Seiken Safe Nenkam Seiken Safe no for say safe nenkam seiken Thank you guys for being here. And yes, good morning and good evening for those of you around the world in different time zones.
Good morning and good evening.
All right, this subject of ascension, and then specifically combining the mind and heart and the importance of that, and what does that look like, and how do you do it?
Well, interestingly, on the topic of ascension, the combination of using the mind and using the heart's intelligence are required. It's actually impossible to evolve yourself spiritually if you're not combining these two things. Because within this physical reality, the mind is very important. You use your mind for logic, you use it for discernment, you use it for critical thinking in general, and you can use the heart to attune yourself to that which is beneficial for you. The energy that comes from the heart space is the most intelligent energy, in fact, that you have access to, because it is through the heart space that is the portal to all of existence. So every answer that you want is going to be through your heart space. And what you need to understand is that the heart speaks through energy, okay? So when you think about the way your mind works, you think in terms of language, yeah. When you think about how the heart works and communicates, it's better to understand it through the idea that the heart is going to communicate to you through the way that you feel. All right?
Could you differentiate between feeling something and emotions? I think those get intertwined as the same thing, as feeling and emotions are exactly the same thing, just two different terms. Would you answer that question?
Well, in general, they are similar, because the problem, the reason that people get confused about that is that at this point in time, humanity is not used to attuning to the energy that's coming through the heart field. So emotions do communicate through the heart field. But when you don't have a lot of practice with understanding what that energy is saying, what that energy is communicating to you, and you allow yourself to have an immediate thought response to the emotion itself, that thought response actually colors the emotional experience, because we teach about the 8 fields of humanity. There's a thought field and there's an emotional field, and these two fields literally play ping pong off of each other, meaning that when you have an emotion, you have a thought response. When you have a thought, you have an emotional response. And so you have to practice deciphering what is truly happening in order to have extreme emotional intelligence. So in general, feeling and emotion is the same thing.
I've noticed I don't want to digress too far here, but I've noticed that people have pushback when you say, well, we're using our emotions as actually as a tool, as an advantage here, as a point of navigation. And I've had the pushback of, well, but emotions, if you let your emotions rule you, then it's just chaos and you're all over the map and you're not stable.
Well, that's true. But we're not saying that you allow your emotions to rule you. In fact, what we're saying is that emotions have ruled humanity because they don't know how to interact with them properly. Okay. So in the realm of the heart is the realm of the emotions. It's this very strong emotional energy that communicates through this field. And you're always going to interpret it as emotion, because that is the way that the energy communicates. And the important thing to realize about this is that for humanity, the emotional energy is your strongest energy. And that's why it is so important to understand how to interact with emotions. This is why we teach emotional alchemy. It's one of our primary focuses, because if you guys can learn how to have negative emotion, be present with it, and transform it by engaging your mind, engaging your ability to monitor yourself, to observe yourself, to decipher the nuance of messages that are happening through the emotions, then you can engage your perception to a degree that allows you to transform the negative emotional energy into positive emotional energy. Because remember, the thought field and the emotional field are playing ping pong. Perception, which is field 7, the field of perception, also dictates what happens in these other two fields. So when you play with perception, you also have a ricochet effect within the emotional self and within the thought self. So when you're engaging all of these things, you can have a lot of clarity on what is being communicated to you through your heart field. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah. So the idea of growth and ascension, and maybe for just a second we should make one quick sidetrack, if you can make it quick. I don't know if you can or not. But what is this? We keep saying ascension. What is ascension from your perspective, of the angelic perspective? What does that mean?
Simply put, ascension is simply spiritual evolution.
Okay.
Because as you evolve, all of these things that we're talking about, as you become a more highly functioning being, which having the type of awareness that we're talking about, having the type of mastery over the interaction with energy is part of this ascension process. Okay, so it's not like, boom, you've ascended. It's you're ascending.
Right.
Yeah. So as that momentum takes place, as that momentum increases, there is a response from all of existence itself, which then contributes to the furthering of that evolution. Okay, so you have to remember it like this. That's why it's so important. You don't just sit around and go, well, I'm going to just wait for the ascension. The ascension is happening, and the quantum leap type experiences that you guys are wanting are a response to the effort you're putting in right now. It's a consistent communication. It's a consistent relationship. All of existence is connected to each other. So as the desire from the masses becomes more and more apparent, then the answer also becomes more and more powerful. And right now, a lot of people are interested in this entire ascension process, and that's what we would say it is. It's a process. And it's a process that you must be engaged in on a daily basis. And it's not something that you wait for, and it's not something that anyone does for you. But what can happen is that when God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, when the source of intelligent energy responds to the mass request, this is when you can get leaps in that process. Okay? But understand that the leap occurs because of the mass movement or mass desire or mass momentum.
So there's an investment from humanity in the form of a request, a massive collective request that's put into this and then gets a response.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's so you can think of it as a quantum leap, but really if you look at how much wanting and effort and energy is put into it, it isn't really a quantum leap in the way that people normally think of, where you're here and then you just take this huge leap for no good reason. It just happens. There's actually a lot of momentum built by us to get the response that we're looking for.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a process that we're going through right now with the idea of ascension in this response to our asking, our collective asking? Is there something going on in creation that is assisting in that? And what is that assistance? Such as energetic forces from the sun, cosmic interjection. What do you have in a way of perspective on that?
Well, truly, there's no way for us to even describe to you all of the assistance that you have, because you have to understand that everything is connected. Okay, there is field 1, which there are 8 fields to human existence. Field 1 is the spirit field, the field of oneness, the field of absolute connection. Okay, so from this standpoint of understanding, it's absolutely impossible to not have assistance from all existence. You see?
Because nothing is separate.
Because nothing is separate. So the desire itself, this ascension desire, this spiritual evolution desire, is coming from source itself. Okay, so if a desire is coming from source itself, then of course that means all of existence is in cahoots with that desire.
Right.
Okay, so anything you can imagine is assistance. Even that which you perceive to be really dark is still assistance, because darkness catalyzes, is that the right word? Light.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if you really want to have an experience where there's an extreme illumination, what's going to precede that? Darkness is going to precede that. You can't illuminate something that's not dark. You see?
Right, and I notice this too in certain movements in the spiritual movement. There's this idea of duality being something that's we want to avoid that, or we want to quickly consolidate and not have duality, because duality shows a lack of spiritual evolution. And I've noticed that's kind of a no, we're not dual, we're not binary, we're just one. I'm like, well, that's a nice idea, but my life doesn't seem to play out as this perfect oneness with no sense of duality.
Well, like we said, there are 8 fields in the human existence. Okay, so in field 1 you have oneness, in field 7 you have perception of separateness.
Right.
So that's where the ego exists in this field 7. So the fact is that there are multiple truths happening at one time. So both things you said are actually true.
Right. The perception of oneness and the perception of separation are simultaneous experience, if you so choose for it to be then your awareness.
Very much. And this is essentially what combining the mind and heart is all about. It's what Ascension is all about. It's about realizing that there truly is multiple truths happening simultaneously, and the job of all humans, and especially the ones who are very willing, is to take this on very seriously and to start practicing both full presence within the experience of duality, being able to pay attention to that which is dark, because it's through paying attention to what's dark that you can illuminate it and start transforming it into light, and to also become more aware of the truth of oneness, so that you can start to entrain your predominant energy, which is this field 7, field of separateness energy. You can start to entrain that, harmonize that with this field 1, which is the field of oneness, because it's in holding the awareness of both that you have actual spiritual evolution. If you're ignoring either one, then the growth is stifled.
Okay. So with field 7, the egoic field, the feeling of this field of separateness, this idea of separate is actually, like you said, it is a catalyst. We need it. It is a catalyst to help propel us towards the state of oneness that we're also wanting to experience. Am I understand that correctly?
Well, we're not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, I'm going back to the idea of people have the pushback on the whole idea of duality and separateness, and that's not something to even entertain, that's your reality. And I guess I'm suggesting from what you just said that it is actually a necessary component to have to know what you don't. If you don't know the one feeling of separateness, how would you then know what the feeling of oneness feels like? It's a point of contrast.
It is. It's also the point where the desire originates, because all beings originated out of oneness. Okay. Source is so interesting and intelligent that it has created these multi-levels, multi-dimensions of truth to interact with simultaneously. When you are a being that is originated out of oneness, and you come into an existence where you're experiencing absolute separateness.
One pause, just a second. Video stopped. is it still working? Let us know if you've picked it back up on the, let me check on one thing. Forgive me, guys, on the Angel-Geschichte feed and on the Dimensions of Disclosure. I've got to check one thing here to see if we can improve matters. That did not help me improve matters. 1 second here. Can't do that. All right. Sorry, guys. There we go. Nope, we're working off of LTE. All right. Sorry about that. I was just making sure that we were, okay, we're working off of a cell service on this one. So, all right. Okay. Forgive me. Go ahead.
So when you end up in this experience of separation, the desire comes forth of, I want to feel connected. Okay. And so I want to feel connected. Yeah, that, if that's what you're asking, that is the catalyst.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You know what you want from the state that you're in over here in 7. And I'm going to change out a light. Keep going.
So it is important to be able to hold both of these simultaneously in order to work toward what you really want. And when you understand that the entire desire of Source is essentially to have separate experience and then to have oneness experience while having the separate experience simultaneously, so as to bring all of itself back home through personal choice, through separate choice, you see. So it's this whole other level of oneness. It's an integration after separation, and that's the next component of spiritual evolution, is this integration process. So, we've said to Angel, one of the things that we want to do, one of the things that we're here to help humanity with, is to bring to your human culture, our culture, which is a connected culture. It's a oneness culture, but it's also a very aware culture. There's no sense of denial within that existence. And that's one of the main things that humanity needs to work on at this point, is its tendency toward denial. And the reason that humanity has a tendency toward denial is exactly what we were talking about in the first place, which is when you guys do not trust yourselves to be able to engage with your emotional energy in a healthy way, the go-to is to deny that it exists, because you feel so powerless in that interaction that to admit that things exist that cause you emotional pain it's a lose scenario, because if you don't know how to handle the emotional pain, if you don't know how to transform it, then you have no reason to engage with it, you see, because all it'll do is bring you down.
Right.
So that's why, to really understand spiritual evolution, you have to understand that being able to fully feel your emotion and to interact with them in a healthy way, to be able to deeply listen to what's occurring with that emotional energy, and to be able to sort it and start moving it toward the emotional state that you want, or the matured emotional state, is essential. Do you understand what we're saying? Mm-hmm. This really is connecting the heart and the mind. You have to be able to feel and think at the same time. So when someone is saying, well, we're going to be just, if we allow ourselves to truly, completely be present and feel our emotions, then we're going to be ruled by our emotions.
Right.
Then that person is saying, when my emotion takes over, I don't have any thinking capabilities.
That's exactly what they're saying.
And what we're saying is, you have to engage your thinking capabilities when you're having intense emotion. And you have to start practicing how to deal with those emotions, so that when you're in situations where you have overwhelming emotion, you are not feeling a lack of confidence in being able to keep your wits about you.
So can I use a very pop culture example?
Sure. Just
briefly, and because this is how I work. So there's this idea on the Marvel cinematic universe, you have this whole Avengers series and all these Marvel superhero movies, and one of the characters is the Hulk, and Hulk is this scientist who gets exposed to gamma radiation, which really brings out this inner emotional, overly wrought beast of great power, who's powered by his anger. And as you're moving along, they kind of guide him like a guided missile. He's going to explode somewhere. You better get him where you need him to go so he can wreak havoc. And that's all he can do when he's in this hulked out stage. When his emotions, particularly in this case, anger, overcomes him, he is out of control. In the very final Avengers movie, they showed the professor, the scientist, coming to an agreement and living with that inner Hulk, those emotions, and coming to an agreement of, yes, there's power in your anger, there's power in these strong emotions, but let's make an agreement that I'm also always, the scientist, the mind is always going to be present as well, and we're going to live harmoniously in the same body so that we can take advantage of both qualities.
Yeah, that's good.
So if you don't know what that we're talking about, watch the final Avengers Endgame movie, and you'll see this example of the Hulk coming to an agreement with the scientist and both living within the same body. So it's a combining of that mind and heart, and there's a feeling that comes with that. There's something, when you first do it, and I've watched people, as I've worked with folks, I've watched them do this, when they, for the first time ever, consciously drop down in there, this purposeful dropping into the chest. I've watched people just have tears run down their face, or their expressions are of horror, wonderment, as they are like, whoa, I'm conscious while I'm doing this, and they're swimming in it. But as they sit with it, it's the initial shock of it tends to start to dissipate until it becomes something that is an agreement that gets made of, oh, I'm here to observe, I'm here to also take inventory of what's going on in here, and now I know, since I'm aware, what I can work on. And after a while, it seems it becomes like an observer. So even if you're having strong emotions, they come through you in a very powerful way, and yet there's a part of you, the mind, that is also observing this going on at the same time. You're like, well, isn't this interesting? Look how strongly I feel in this moment about this situation. It's amazing that this stimulus is bringing out this kind of reaction within me.
Well, yeah, precisely. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's in that state of awareness that you're able to actually examine what's happening. And that's when you start engaging perception, and you start engaging different ways of problem solving regarding what you feel, if it is a negative emotion. So most people don't know that negative emotion, all it really is emotional energy that has not matured. That's really it. It's immature emotional energy.
Because it's not wrong or stunting your spiritual growth to feel anger.
Well, no, not at all.
Right? Or to feel sadness, or any of the emotions that we feel are uncomfortable. Let's face it, what we're talking about is extreme discomfort when we say something feels negative. But those are a normal process of the human experience, aren't they?
Yeah. Just consider the topic of forgiveness. In order to get to a place of forgiveness, what is the dominant thing that has to take place? A perception shift. A perception shift must take place in order to experience true forgiveness. So what does that tell you about what forgiveness is? It tells you that forgiveness is actually a mature emotion, a mature emotional state. Okay? It's oh, I've done the work. I've problem solved this. I have found a way to look at this which truly resonates with what I want, which is I want to feel peaceful. And I have genuinely found a way to observe this entire thing, a way to interact with this entire thing that I feel peaceful about, and so I'm willing to let go of my anger toward this individual. That's what forgiveness is. So that lets you know that that is simply a spiritual evolution within some type of scenario that you've experienced within your life. And you come to that place by engaging your heart, your emotions, your intention. You know, when you have the intention to feel peaceful, when you have the intention to feel as though you've healed something that's been shattered, then you've set yourself on a path. And if you will allow yourself to follow the energy of that path, which your heart will lead you in, it will take you through different steps of that journey to get you there. Now, some of those steps are going to be anger. Some of those steps are going to be grief. And the key is to not ignore those steps, and also to not think that they're going to last forever. They are part of the process itself. And so when you're paying attention to whatever it is that surfaces, when you're able to be very present with it, and when we say be present with it, we mean completely invest all of who you are, all of your awareness, all of your consciousness, all of your thought, all of your willingness into whatever it is that you're feeling in order to fully comprehend it, in order to fully understand it. When you do that, the next thing that happens, and it happens naturally, is you start to experience compassion toward your own suffering. When you experience compassion toward your own suffering, you have a lot of clarity about others who are suffering. And you realize that those who bring you pain through their own suffering. And when you realize that this whole thing is about suffering, and your greatest desire is to be a part of ending suffering, that pathway really starts to form in a powerful way. And things like compassion become at the top of your priorities list of ways to be, ways to interact with yourself and others in this world. When you start to engage problem solving, presence, compassion, you cannot help but transform these negative emotions that cause you to suffer. So what do you become at the end of those type of processes? You become a more expanded human being. You become more intelligent in your ability to forgive. And it's not faked, it's not forced, it's just the natural unfolding of that integration process, essentially. And so the more you pave that, the more you become it. The more you become it, the more you emit it. The more you emit it, the more power you have in helping this entire world to transform. Because suffering begets suffering, and compassion begets compassion, you see. So when you allow yourself to engage fully in all of these different ways where you really are connecting the heart and the mind, when you have a genuine desire to create peace within yourself, and then to be someone who also spreads peace in this world, then you can't help but start becoming it. Do you guys understand what we're saying?
There's an entrainment that takes place.
Yeah. Just like it can move in the opposite direction too. If you decide, that you want to be one of the wealthiest people in the world, and you don't really care who you have to step on to get there, then that energy that you're putting forth, that intention that you're putting forth, is that I will sacrifice anyone else's well-being to accomplish what I want to accomplish, then you will become a nastier and nastier human being, because that momentum takes hold. So it is important to put an intention forth and to hold yourself accountable to doing your best to line up with that intention in every move that you make. And that takes both your mind and your heart. You cannot do that with just one of them. You have to engage both of them. Do you guys understand what we're saying?
Yeah, and it feels so much more powerful when they're combined. You can feel this, the combination is greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a synergistic effect that takes place.
Yeah, because that's how you're all designed.
Can we take questions?
Of course.
Would anybody have a question they'd like to pose so we can answer that for you? We'll wait for a second to see if you guys can type it out or click it out.
We have a question for you.
Sure.
What is Keith, as a Chinese medical practitioner, what is the understanding from the ancient Chinese on this?
Well, I go back to not just Chinese, but monasticism in general. And I haven't studied Buddhism to the degree I have probably even Taoism, certainly not Christianity. But I know in those practices, there's the idea of the heart being the general, being the grand overseer of the whole person. And really in Chinese medicine in particular, in monasticism, the brain, because we think of the mind as being in the brain, there's not much talk about that. There's not much talk about the gray matter. There's much more talk, much more about the sacredness and the connectedness of the heart. And so when we look at the heart as this emperor or empress, then the care of the heart is everything. So the idea of the mind being important, sure, but it is definitely a far reduced player. It's an adjunct player in a person being settled and balanced. In fact, the heart actually is what gives the mind its rooted center. Mm-hmm. It keeps it from being scattered. It keeps it on point, keeps it present. And so if there's agitation in the heart, you don't have that.
That's very accurate. So do you know why that's the case? How would you word that?
Why this affects this? Mm-hmm. Well, again, because it is the ruler. And not only does it affect the mind, if the heart isn't rooted, it's affecting every other aspect of you.
So when you say the heart is rooted, what does that mean to you?
Well, to get specific, you talk about, so all the organs that have blood passing through them or hold and store blood are imbuing properties to the blood. And so the blood quality, I don't mean just like your blood profile in a blood panel that you get from your physician or from a laboratory. We're talking about the energetic structure of the blood. It is imbued certain qualities by the heart, which if the heart is in a healthy, calm state, it imbues healthy calmness to the blood. Where does the blood flow? Everywhere. It feeds everything. So if it's rooted, the blood is thick and solid and full of peacefulness, then everything else in the kingdom of the person is also peaceful and rooted. Mm-hmm. We do have a question, just to let you know. My brain wants my heart to be free, but the heart is resistant.
All right, we're going to feel into you, Pat. So why do you perceive that your heart isn't free? We want to know what you think about that. Because interestingly, it's usually the other way around. The heart is generally quite free, but it's the interaction with the mind that convinces it that it's not.
It's funny, the idea of the mind and freedom and its opposite of freedom being caged. In Chinese culture, there's the idea of the monkey mind. When someone says, I can't get my mind to stop racing, it's just all over the place, it's agitated. It's the monkey that's going nuts. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot about calming the monkey down to get that sense of no longer agitating everybody else. Pat says it doesn't want to love certain others.
Yeah, okay, so in fact that is more in field 7 than it is in the connection field of the heart.
And field 7 is that feeling of a field of separateness, of egoic.
The field of perception.
Perception.
So when you feel like there are certain people who don't deserve your love, it's because there is some type of story attached to that, which means that there's some type of perception attached to it. Okay? And when there's a perception that's attached to something that makes you feel like it's not okay to have your heart open and to offer love, what that's telling you is that there is something that you have still not worked through within that field of perception to make you feel safe. Okay, so it's not that you should try to force yourself to change the story. It's that you should try to understand what is it about this individual that makes me feel like I'm not safe? So that needs to be examined, because essentially what the heart field is telling you, what that resistance to loving is telling you, is I'm not safe, because if I open my heart again and I get hurt again by doing that, what it's going to do is cause me to distrust myself even more. And what I truly want is to have trust in me. So in order to preserve that trust, I have to feel safe in these relationships. And if I don't feel safe, then I'm not opening these doors. So that's some perception work to be doing. It's both perception work and emotion work to understand what occurred within these interactions, what occurred within these relationships that is affecting you negatively even when it's not possibly continuing. Do you understand what we're saying, Pat? Was that clear?
Yeah, it was to me anyway. Mostly. This is from Michelle.
So we have another person who says, so I had a dream last night that I was in a room with jade and rose quartz. After researching, they both relate to the heart. Is this a positive form?
Is this a positive?
For the continued work that I do
Yeah.
daily, or is it a negative aspect that I need more work on?
And then she says, or something more specific.
Okay. We're feeling into your dream, Michelle. It feels to us like the symbolism of those two stones. Well, number one, you can engage with those two stones. Those are both very healing stones. And it's talking to you about nurturing, about finding ways to genuinely nurture your spiritual self. Okay.
I'm going to scroll to the bottom to see what we have going on. Okay. Anybody else with a question?
So we're going to talk just for a minute regarding the question that Pat asked, where it doesn't feel safe to open the heart, because, that is going on a lot in the world today. And we would never tell you, oh, you should just open your heart, without doing any kind of work in that area to honor your sense of safety. It is very important to honor your sense of safety. Okay, so when you do feel resistance to a relationship, it might have to do with that actual relationship. It also might have to do with experiences that you've had in the past, which are now stored in your memory and in your perception memory as information that is going to surface anytime something of similar resonance occurs. So sometimes, for example, Angel's had issues opening her heart to Keith, not because of Keith, but because of what she experienced before Keith. So it's important to be able to examine if what you're feeling as far as resistance to being open to an individual actually has to do with that individual, or if it has to do with something that you haven't fully dealt with. Because sometimes you can really destroy relationships that are in your current situation because you're transposing suffering from your history onto that current situation. Mm-hmm. And lots of relationships are ruined this way. So it's another reason why it is very important to allow yourself to be very honest with whatever it is you're feeling, and to allow yourself to very much examine it and problem solve within it in order to heal deep wounding. And if you do find that it is about the current relationship, it is about something you're experiencing with that particular person, then you can actually take it up with that person. And through your desire to work it out, you will understand whether or not you have a willing partner to work it out. And a lot of people get stuck in this part of it too, because they think, well, if I put forth enough effort to work this out, then the other person, they don't really have to do anything. I can do all the work and keep that relationship going. And often that's not the case. Often, if you're trying to continue a relationship, but the other person doesn't have any interest in engaging in this healing process with you, then it's only going to create more pain for you, more suffering. So it is important to know the difference with that. If you have someone who is willing to do this type of work with you, then it can really be a beautiful thing. You see, so it is important to know the difference, because when it comes to relationships, you cannot do all the work if you wish for that relationship to continue. That has to be both doing the work. If you end the relationship, or at least create some layers of boundaries, so to speak, then you can, focus on your part of it and you can heal that aspect. But if you're continuing to engage with someone who's causing you harm in that way, you're not going to be able to heal it. It's the same concept as having a cut, and every day you pick the scab. It's going to take a long time, if ever, for that cut to heal. Same exact concept when you're dealing with the emotional self.
This is my childhood friend Marianne. She says, I recently lost someone dear to me. They passed away. My heart consistently feels in a state of grief and sadness, and then my mind races, which causes more grief and sadness, and continued mind racing. Currently feel unable to control either one. How do I get the heart and mind to work together better instead of separate?
Well, loss is a painful thing, and there's no way around that. And often you guys have expectations to get over loss in a certain period of time, and you tell this story to yourself, which is basically a dictator story. And it's, I should feel this way, I shouldn't feel this way, I should be over this by now, I know that this person is still in existence, so my suffering makes no sense. The problem with that is that it's basically like telling a little kid that's upset about something that they have no reason to be upset. Anyone who's experienced that with a child knows that the child doesn't hear what you say and go, oh, okay, I'm not upset anymore. That's never what happens. Why is that? And it's because that aspect that is feeling whatever emotion it is has to feel validated in order for that emotion to start to turn into something that's more enjoyable. You can't force the emotional self into a new emotion. You have to love the emotional self into new emotion. Do you see what we're saying?
So practically, if Marianne gets up in the morning, it's time to go to work, and she's like, okay, I've got to get this together so I can be at work and be present and do my job and interact with people. What would you suggest to her about practically getting up in the morning and doing that? What does she do to help that process?
Okay, how do I get the heart and mind to work together better? Well, to answer Keith's question, if you're trying to focus on something in the morning before you have to be somewhere, and you realize that every morning you have trouble with it, then we would say wake up an hour earlier. Because what's happening is you need to dedicate time to your healing process. You need to dedicate presence to your healing process. And trying to starve yourself out will never do the trick. Only nurturing yourself will do the trick. Okay? You see what we're saying?
Sure.
So what we're saying is, if you genuinely feel upset when you wake up in the morning, because you wake up and the first thing you think about is how much you miss someone, then you're just going to have to be with yourself right then. You're going to have to allow yourself to feel that sadness. And then you're going to need to get centered and quiet and allow yourself to have spiritual interaction with whomever you've lost. And
what do you mean by that?
We mean those of you who are listening to us, we're very confident that you guys do not think that death is actually the end. Okay? So that's why we're talking to you in this way. Death isn't the end, not even close. Those who do die can hear you. So if you find yourself grieving, then it's time to focus on finding a new way to connect with the person that you miss, because they do still exist. And although it's not satisfying that they don't exist in the way that they did, they do still exist. So now it's up to you. They don't have any problem feeling you. You're the one who has problem feeling them. So it's on you to develop an ability to feel communion with that individual in the way that they exist now.
Good.
And it's only through that communion that you're going to start feeling a different perception emerge. Okay? That new perception that emerges will absolutely give you peace, and probably even a sense of happiness, okay, and excitement. Because as you grow in your confidence and your ability to commune with those who are no longer in their bodies, of course the grief lessens. So but you have to put forth the effort to find a new way to connect. You know, you guys live in these physical bodies, and so you become very used to your sense of connection being reliant upon these physical bodies. But it's not the end all in connection. And, you know, if you can learn how to connect with people on a more spiritual level while you're in bodies, when they do die, when they are no longer in their bodies, it's easier to find that sense of connection because you've already felt the nuance. You already know what it feels like. But when it's not fully practiced within a human's life, then it's more difficult when that person passes. But we promise you, those that you love that pass are very much interested in continuing their relationship with you. So to be able to find that connection and feel that connection again is very important to them as well. So you have magnificent assistance in this endeavor. Okay.
You know, and I had an interesting experience with that because growing up very Protestant, you know, at least my understanding of the teaching was that, you know, when they pass, they're in heaven and there's this huge gulf between the two of you and there's really no connection till you join them. And then as I moved from that very conservative fundamentalist viewpoint to a more, mystical viewpoint in Christianity, that part of Christianity says no. In fact, you can communicate right now. Just because they're not in the body does not mean there's that separation at all. There's very much still connectedness. Feel free to talk to them. Feel free to ask them for intercession, is what we were being taught in the Orthodox Church. And so I kind of graduated out of this sense of separation into connectedness, and that it was okay until I no longer was adhering to any of those things anymore. And so what I was realizing is that if I take this process of intentionally, because most of the time our consciousness is sitting in the brain, it's sitting in the head, this cavity right here. We keep our awareness in here. We're looking out of our eyes, we're using our ears, or we're speaking out of this mouth, we're using this nose, all the senses that we use a lot without, you know, aren't necessarily dependent upon the body below it. Well, I realized if I dropped, not of any invention of my own, but if I dropped my consciousness down into my chest, and even as I'm saying this, I'm deliberately making that focus more and more so I can, in real time, give the example. I'm in my chest. I have a very new awareness of everything around me. I have an altered state immediately by dropping into this place. And from here, of practicing that till I can hold it there for at least a decent amount of time, then when I reach out to feel someone in a body or not, my ability to feel that connection is much more grand than it would be if I was still keeping the consciousness locked away in my head.
Sure, absolutely.
And so I practice that with Angel. I practice that with Origin. I practice that with anybody that I've basically been permission to connect with in that way. And that way, if I do lose them in a body, I do have that ability to go, but I know what you feel like. And the people that have passed on, that are no longer in bodies, that I've practiced both with, they feel even more beautiful and grand once they're not in a body, depending on their level of development while they're in a body. So anyway, that's my personal experience with this idea of connecting with people while in a body or not, and how if you practice that, here's the thing though, it doesn't just make your relationship with the person once they're not in a body possible, it also makes the relationship while they're in a body better.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
It enriches and brings more depth and dimension to that relationship, to that person, to people in your life, when you practice this idea of combining the heart, the mind down into the heart. You've taught at one point in the past that if there's a shortcut even more than that practice, that skill of dropping it down like in an elevator, but that you think about that one person or puppy or cat or gerbil, whatever it is you have, that you have this pure unadulterated love for. If you can think about that person, it drops you right in your chest immediately. Yeah, it's the shortcut. Because I've had people go, well, I can't do the elevator thing. I don't know how to get it there. It gets stuck. Then I'm reminded of what you taught us was, then think of that one person or thing that just brings you immediate, pure love. And you'll watch their face go, oh, there it is.
Yeah, and then immediately they're in that heart space.
They're there immediately. And so they can always call themselves back in a moment. Yeah. So it's a beautiful skill. There's been very few things that I have learned and am still learning that have been huge spiritual growth techniques than this idea, and that is an ancient practice. Whether it is in ancient Christianity, the early church, where the monastics would go in and they would deliberately make that drop down while saying, "O Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me." Mercy meaning have grace poured out on me, have connection, have purification, so on. And no different in Taoism. I would imagine no different in Buddhism, or possibly even the Muslim faith, when you're getting into more that ascetic lifestyle, that introspective development. This idea is universal. All the ancient cultures that have been worth anything, in my opinion, have known that this is the key of living the fuller, richer life.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Well, guys, we are at the top of the hour, and I said I would keep it at 60 minutes or so. So we appreciate you joining us here, and we're going to try to make this a fairly regular thing that we do on both DoD Collaborative and also, of course, on Angel-Geschichte Facebook page. And we appreciate you tuning in, whether it was live or whether it's in the recording. And any kind of comments you want to make after the fact, feel free. We'll try to track these threads and respond to them accordingly. Yeah. So appreciate you tuning in. And like I said, we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.